What's up, guys? Welcome back. I know it's been a long time since we've had chess on the channel. I play chess on my phone just about every day, although I only get to play in a sanctioned slow tournament once a year. This will be the Westchester Chess Championship. If you're watching from out of town, Westchester is the first county that's north of New York City. It's a six-round tournament. The time controls are 1 hour aside, which I think should favor me. As you get older, I stop having the reflexes to play fast chess, and I also don't have the stamina to play classical chess, where each side gets 2 or 3 hours a game. So 1 hour aside is perfect for me. I'm starting the tournament with a rating of 2018. My opponent in round one is rated a little over 1400. I'm playing with the black pieces, so without further ado, let's hop into the action. So I played a Nimzo Indian, which is one of my favorite weapons. Now, when I was a kid learning this in the 1980s, just about all the books showed Queen C2 as being the book move in this position, just to add defense to the pin knight. However, it seems like in the last 10-20 years, the move E3 has now become more popular. There's a so-called Rubinstein variation. That's what he played. And I played a sideline, which is B6, with the goal of getting my bishop out on the long diagonal. And he played A3, which is actually a mistake. So usually when you play the E3 Nimzo, you just want to develop your pieces and castle and leave it up to black to decide if he wants to trade off the knight. Usually this will now just lose a immediate tempo. So of course I took it, developed my bishop, and I got my knight into E4, which is one of the main points of the Nimzo, is try to get control over the E4 square. I played bishop D3. Of course, I cannot take the so-called free pawn on C3 because my knight will then be trapped. He will just play queen C2 or something. So after castling, I played F5. Again, very thematic move in the Nimzo, adding to the defense of the knight on E4. Of course, now I'm threatening the pawn on C3, so he defended it with queen C2. And now to develop my last minor piece. Of course, it doesn't make a lot of sense to develop it on the rim. And if I develop it to C6, this would undefend the knight on E4. So the normal way to develop it is to play D6 and try to get it out to D7. And he played a knight D2, immediately going after my knight. Now, one of the moves that I looked at in this position but rejected pretty quickly was queen H4, which is a very thematic move. Of course, then I'm just adding defense to the knight, as well as some attacking possibilities. In some cases, you can do a rook lift. And I rejected it pretty quickly because of the move G3. Of course, one thing I missed during the game is that I can just play knight G5 here. Of course, he cannot take my queen because of checkmate. That would have been a nice way to finish off the game, but that's not what happened. But then again, white doesn't have to play G3 here. He can just play F3, forcing the trade of knights anyway. So in this position, I just took his knight on D2. And got my last minor piece developed to D7. And he played E4. So overall, pretty good opening play for my opponent. Now, one thing I don't want to do here is to trade off the pawn, because that would leave my e-pawn pretty weak. First of all, he would force the trade of the bishops, and then I'm going to have a lot of trouble defending my pawn, my e-pawn. I also looked at F4, but I thought this was premature. In some variations, he has a move like E5, which is, first of all, has an attack H7 square, but also is going to break up some of the pawns in the center, which should favor the two bishops to open up the position like that. I also looked at G6. So this is somewhat, providing some defense to the battery of the queen and the bishop, but at the same time, it is weakening the dark squares. He has moves like bishop H6. So I rejected all of those. Eventually, after a long think, I played queen f6, which is a mistake, as we'll see in a minute. So the idea of queen f6 is to connect my rooks, also develop my queen, and add defense to the f pawn. And the other idea that I had after his next move, rook a e8, is to play queen g6, which effectively pins the e pawn. Of course, now the pawn cannot take or play f5 because that would leave his g2 pawn hanging. I've checkmate there. And I thought in this position, I can just continue to improve my pieces, moves like rook a e8 and knight f6, while his pawn is pinned. But as we'll see in a minute, this plan did not work. He played rook e3. There's only one real move that makes sense here. Of course, he's now threatening rook g3, so it almost forces f4. And then after he swung his rook round to h3, I'd e5. And I was actually pretty happy with this position. Of course, now his pawn is blockaded. And given the fact that it is a closed position, this should definitely favor the knight versus the two bishops. He played rook e1. Now here I had a long think, because even though I thought I'm better here, it's actually difficult to come up with a plan. One plan that I looked at was to try for some kind of pawn storm with g4 and h4. Of course, this would mean first moving my queen, probably to a square like e8 or e6. Another plan that I looked at was to maneuver my rook into the game, possibly on the G file. This looked a little bit less risky than the pawn storm, but this is extremely slow to get your rook into the game like this. I also had to worry about some tactical considerations. So, for example, if I were to play rook f6, I thought he might be able to come in queen a4. For example, if I defend it, I'll just show a sample line. Then he has this move c5, which actually opens up a double attack. So first of all, he is threatening c6 to pin my minor pieces, but also bishop c4 with a pin against the king. So there's still a lot of considerations here that I had to look at. Another idea that I looked at was to immediately go after the rook on h3, which at first glance looked like it's almost trapped. But at the same time, if I were to play moves like knight f6 and bishop c8, I thought possibly he could he could cement his rook on h4, play a move like g3, and it's still somewhat difficult to get at it. So after a very long think, I played queen e8, which the engine doesn't like. Now, incidentally, the engine came up with two plans here that I hadn't even considered during the game. One plan that it likes is the move c5. Of course, this is blockading the position even more. Well, first of all, this is pressuring the d4 square. But if white were to either push d5 or trade, this should have an advantage to black. It would lock up the position even more, or cause double isolated pawns. Another plan that the engine came up with that I also did not consider was king h8, with the goal of now swinging the rook over to g8 and helping to support a pawn storm. So these were both excellent ideas that I missed in the game. So anyway, I did play queen e8 with the goal of getting out the way of my g-pawn. And he played queen d1. Of course, now I have a problem where if I were to play an immediate g5, he can swing his queen round to g4, which is putting pressure on both the g-pawn as well as the knight. So if I follow up with a move like queen g6, that would leave the knight undefended. So in the end, I just decided to play rook f6, intending to parry the rook g4 with rook g6, but he played queen h5. So now we can see this whole idea behind putting my queen on f6, and then to g6, and then back to e8, and then trading it just simply wasted a lot of time. But at the same time, I was actually happy to see the queens come off the board, because I thought at this stage, I thought the rook is now easier to trap, and I don't have to risk so much when I do my pawn storm with opening up my king with the queens off the board. So I played g6. He went back, and he played g3, g5. He traded, put his king in the corner. I took the empty file, and over the next few moves, I just simply improved my position. Of course, I decided to get my rook into the game prior to bishop c8, f3, bishop c8. And you'll see his rook is almost trapped, where it can only go back and forth between these two squares. h5. Of course, he has to worry about his g1 square. And in this case, the engine actually doesn't mind if I trade the bishops, because it still says the rook is somewhat immobilized just between these two squares. But in this case, I decided to keep the bishops, attack the c-pawn, which would, in essence, force the bishop back. Attacked his rook. He came over. And then over the next few moves, I was just able to improve my position, get my knight to the g6 square, and my bishop to the c8 square, where finally I was able to trap the rook. Took that, knight h4, going after the f-pawn, which he took. And at this point, he actually touched the king and then resigned, because no matter where he moves his king, I will win his bishop. But even if he had moved his bishop back, I had plans next to just move my king around to the queen side and just start gobbling his pawns. Now, incidentally, the engine came up with a move here that wraps up the game immediately that I did not see during the game, which was c6. And whether or not white takes or doesn't take, it makes no difference. Black is just going to play rook c7 and infiltrate with his rook. And that would wrap up things much quicker. So what to say about this game? So I did play a 90, which I'm happy with. I think at my strength, 90 or higher should be good. I did have a couple of misses, especially in the middle game with moves like queen f6, where I could have certainly saw the engine ideas. But just overall, I'm generally happy with my play in this game. Now, this is a 6-round tournament. I will be away next week on vacation, so I won't have a second round game, but I should be back in 2 weeks for the third round game. I hope you're enjoying the recaps, and we'll see you all in the next video.